Another one, the famous line from Brenda from Bristol summed up public appetite for elections and referendums. But guess what? The people of Sheffield are heading to the ballot box again, their 10th time in 5 years. This time, it's about who calls the shots at the City Council. A petition signed by more than 20,000 people is demanding more voices need to be heard when it comes to the big decisions affecting the city. The story now from our South Yorkshire political reporter, Liz Roberts.
What can you tell me about a referendum in Sheffield this May?
Don't know anything about it at all.
Did you know?
No.
There are some things in life we have to put into the hands of others. But when it comes to running public services, a group of campaigners in Sheffield decided the council just didn't cut it. So now there'll be a referendum, whether people know about it or not.
We've had a referendum, a national referendum, and look how long it's taken to sort that out. I want to know more about what this referendum, how it affects people in Sheffield.
I like to sort of stick with sort of what we know works. You know, I think if it's not broken, maybe don't fix it.
We need more information out there, and we need to know what is there for us, and we all need to make a decision for the best for our city.
People are getting used to going to the polls here in Sheffield. In the last 5 years, they've had the chance to vote more than 10 times in local elections, general elections, an EU referendum, a Sheffield City region mayoral election, to name a few. And that's not even counting parish and town council elections. Sheffield City Council has a strong leader model. So what does this mean? Well, Labour currently have a majority, so one of their councillors is elected leader, who in turn appoints a cabinet. Each of them is in charge of things like transport or housing, and they have the final say on decisions. What's being proposed is a committee system. This is where a group of councillors would make the final decision, as opposed to one person. It was over the fight to save Sheffield's street trees that questions began to be asked over exactly who decides what at the City Council. It sparked a campaign which got the support of more than 20,000 voters, enough to force a referendum.
What a lot of people said to us on the street was, well, really, what is the point of voting for a councillor if, you know, that is the model, that in fact it's just 10 out of 84 of one party that make decisions. So why do we bother voting for our councillors? They haven't got the power to represent us.
Now it's actually up to the council to work out what an alternative system might look like.
There are a number of people who've got issues that they believe that the way that we make decisions is not open and transparent. There's no wonder after 10 years of austerity, decisions have had to be made. Some of them have been unpalatable only for members to test their principles as well. So it's no wonder that we've got to this point after a decade of those cuts that we're now having a look at the situation of how we govern ourselves and the town hall and the city.
With the referendum triggered, doing nothing is not an option. It'll be up to the people of Sheffield to decide whether the city's new look will be a quick trim or a whole new style.
And Liz joins us in the Politics North studio. Hello, Liz. So how enthusiastic are the good people of Sheffield about this referendum?
I think it's perhaps less about enthusiasm and more about how much people know about it, to be honest with you. I don't think a lot of people are aware it's even happening, and a large part of that is due to the timescale of this. The campaign had a year to put its petition together. That was presented to the council towards the back end of last summer. But then those names and addresses all had to be verified to make sure there was the 20+ thousand that made up the 5% that was needed for the referendum. By the time all that had happened, it doesn't give the council a hell of a lot of time to actually put together a proposal for an alternative, and that's what it's busy doing now. That'll get put to council in February. That's all got to be approved, and then I think there'll be a wider campaign to let people know that this referendum is happening and you have a choice here. And certainly the campaigners are going to want people to vote for change, so I think they're going to be out on the streets.
But it was the controversy over the trees being chopped down that effectively triggered this, wasn't it?
I think it certainly was what made people start looking at the way the council makes decisions. Not just this council, of course. The strong leader and cabinet model is used in most councils across the country, but they really started delving into how that process works and what alternatives there might be. And what they're saying now is, for Sheffield in particular, they don't think it's the right model for the city.
Diana Johnson, I think the question for Sheffield and many other areas when it comes to local democracy is, just how much do people's votes count?
Well, I think there is a real issue with local democracy and local government, and when you look at the turnout for elections, you realise that not many people get involved in elections for councils, but they do really important work. And I'm really interested in what's happening in Sheffield, because I think, having been a councillor years ago when we had the committee structure, and also then moving on when we had the cabinet structure as well, I think there's a lot to be said for including all councillors in decision making and not leaving it to a cabinet and a strong leader model. And I think the problem is that this has been kind of forced on local government from Whitehall again, and I think we need to look at different models and how we can engage with people and make people feel that local government is something that they should be interested in and get involved in. Because the other issue is about, I don't know if this is the same in Sheffield, but in Hull it's often difficult to attract good quality people into standing for the council.
And you could argue in Lincolnshire, a largely Conservative dominated area, what's the point in voting? You know, it's generally the Tories that get in.
Well, let me first say it's really great to see that Sheffield are having this referendum. It's a really important exercise in democracy, and it's thanks to the 2011 Localism Act. So this was all about giving more power back to our local communities, and so it's great to see that it's actually happening in Sheffield. But I would also say that, you know, local councillors work incredibly hard, particularly in Lincolnshire, obviously, where I am, but across the country. It's a really good way to serve your community. I know so many who give up so much of their time to help serve their local communities and the people that they live around.
But in terms of when the government have brought in directly accountable roles, and I think off the top of my head, police and crime commissioners comes to mind, the turnout for those elections have been pitiful, haven't they?
Well, I'd obviously like to see more participation in our democracy. We had a pretty big referendum and the participation in that was pretty high, you'll remember. And so there is the will there, but we've got to make sure that people feel that they are empowered, that they have a say in their communities, and that's why having a referendum in Sheffield, for example, is a really positive move, but we've got to make sure people feel that they are heard.